They thought he would never find out. They thought they could hide behind protocol ranks and diplomatic shadows, but the bullet missed. And now the hunter has become the hunted. The man they tried to silence is about to bring down an empire from within. Ibrahim Traoré didn't come into power for fame. He didn't wear the uniform for glory. He wore it for war, for dignity, for the daughters of Burkina Faso who vanished without trace, for the mothers whose tears went unanswered for years. In the name of politics and power, when he announced the total ban on human trafficking, the world applauded, but behind the curtains, the applause turned into whispers, into phone calls, into coded messages. The shadows moved swiftly, because the trafficking network wasn't just local. It was a hydra stretching its roots into capitals far beyond Africa, fueled by foreign interest, protected by corruption, and now threatened by one man who dared to say no to slavery. The first attempt came quietly, a sniper shot as Traoré stood on stage, about to cut the ribbon of Burkina Faso's biggest hospital. The bullet sliced the air, grazed his shoulder, and missed his heart by inches. The crowd panicked, the guards scrambled, but Traoré stood still, blood staining his uniform but fire in his eyes. The message was clear: they would rather kill him than lose control. The second attack was colder, more personal. It came from within his own office. His bodyguard, a man trained, fed, trusted, pulled a gun, but hesitated. Traoré's instincts saved him. The guard was subdued, alive, but moments later bit down on a hidden cyanide capsule and died foaming at the mouth. His last words were a whisper in Russian. No one could understand. The war had just begun, shaken but not broken. Traoré summoned his top intelligence unit. He didn't want reports. He wanted names, faces, locations, and what came back was darker than even his most cynical nightmares. The trafficking network wasn't just a gang, it was an organization. Funded by offshore accounts, protected by political immunity, and backed by those who smiled in public, but plotted in private. His own interior minister, the head of national security, even some senior army officials were part of it, not just silent observers, but active participants, selling their country's children for power and profit. What tore through Traoré's soul wasn't just the betrayal, it was the realization that the enemy wasn't at the border. It was sitting beside him at meetings, advising him, shaking hands in the daylight, and burying bodies by night. He couldn't trust anyone, not even the walls of his own war room. So he made a decision that stunned his inner circle. He would lead the operation himself, no proxies, number generals, no filters, just raw justice. What followed was a covert operation codenamed Fire Vein. The goal was not just to dismantle the network, but to expose it completely, to drag every hidden face into the light. They started in Ouagadougou, raiding a supposed NGO that was a front for trafficking young girls. Their testimonies broke hearts. Girls aged 10, 12, 14, drugged, abused, branded as property, and shipped out of the country in containers labeled medical supplies. Traoré was there, boots in the mud, weapon in hand, leading the charge. Cameras off, orders clear. No survivors for those who resisted. Within 3 days, 20 hideouts were busted. 45 high-value arrests were made. Over 200 girls rescued. And yet, that was just the surface. Every location opened more doors, more names, more monsters. One city led to another: Bobo Dioulasso, Dedugo, even remote border towns that no one had stepped into. For years, in one safe house, they found passports from 5 countries. In another, they found a ledger with payments signed off by a foreign embassy. It was no longer just a Burkina problem, it was international. And still, the UN remained silent. Human rights organizations posted carefully worded statements, but avoided naming names. They knew this was bigger than a local scandal. It was a global market, and Traoré was threatening its spine. He released footage not edited, not cleaned. Raw confessions, children crying, traffickers begging for mercy, documents linking European NGOs and Gulf billionaires. Suddenly the world media began calling him dangerous, unpredictable, authoritarian. But his people knew better. They saw the man who didn't sleep, who bled for them, who raided bunkers, and arrested ministers without. Blinking, he became a ghost to his enemies, moving at night, striking without warning, rescuing slaves, exposing kings his presence. Alone became legend. School children chanted his name, market vendors wore badges with his face, and the digital army that once edited fake speeches now posted real clips of him dragging criminals out of SUVs, reading charges live on television. He was no longer just a president. He was the reckoning. The traffickers began fleeing. Some tried to cut deals, others disappeared mysteriously. But Traoré was relentless. One by one they were hunted, trapped, and brought to trial. One such raid led to the recovery of 67 girls from a villa, guarded by foreign mercenaries. The confrontation lasted 3 hours, gunfire, screams, smoke. But when it ended, Traoré emerged carrying the youngest girl in his arms, her face buried in his chest, her chains broken. The image went viral, not because of the filters, but because of the fury behind it. He declared in a speech that, "Night, this is not charity. This is war, and war has rules. I will make them follow them, or fall by them." And fall they did, including his own interior minister, caught trying to escape with a diplomatic convoy, stripped of his rank on live television, and jailed. His trial was broadcast across the nation, exposing everything from bribes to rituals to foreign meetings where Burkina children were auctioned like cattle. This was not a movie, this was reality, and the world finally had to watch. Ibrahim Traoré had declared war on the invisible, and he was winning every night. He visited rescue centers, spoke to survivors, promised them not just safety but justice, not just shelter but revenge. His approval ratings soared, not because of propaganda, but because of presence. Every street in Faso echoed his name, and still the threats came. Assassination attempts, bomb plots, cyber attacks. Nothing stopped him, because the people were with him. The army stood taller, the youth volunteered in thousands. And even the harshest critics began to say, if this is dictatorship, we choose it over silence. The final strike came months later, a mansion outside Kaya, surrounded by forest, housing the last council of the trafficking syndicate. Drones buzzed above, snipers ready. Traoré gave the green light himself. He led the breach personally. Inside they found files, names, foreign donors, contracts, even evidence linking some enemies of Traoré to regional terrorist groups. It was a geopolitical nightmare. But he didn't flinch. He handed the files to journalists, made it public, and then made it personal. Every rescued girl was brought to the parliament, one by one, to watch justice delivered. The nation wept, not in shame, but in rage and pride. And as Ibrahim stood before his people holding the flag soaked in the sweat of 1,000 battles, he said one line, "I do not lead to be safe. I lead to make my people dangerous again." In that moment, the myth was no longer digital, the man no longer a headline. He was real. He was blood, bone, fire. He was Africa's warning to the world that one man, if righteous, if fearless, can destroy an empire with his bare hands and still sleep, knowing he saved just one more daughter from darkness.